Sometimes I want a crunchy, brain-wrecking challenge. Then I might choose Under Falling Skies or Bullet. Sometimes I want the AI to just constantly make a mockery of my strategy, forcing me to fight fires and change tactics. Then I'll choose Marvel Champions or Eon's End. But often, I'm wanting a game that's a little cozy. It lets me play my own game, my own way, and just chill. So you'll actually find a lot of my most played games on this list. I'm J. Allen Reichert, horror author and solo board game fanatic. And these are my top 5 happy place games. I'm finding it, maybe because it's the affection that I have for each of these games, difficult to put them in any sort of order. I will say that the number 2 and number 1 positions are, I decided to put my basically most played games there, but take all of this in a loose manner. First game on this list is from a legendary Euro designer with many highly regarded games. But I rarely see this specific game mentioned as a favorite because it's not brutal enough. Brutal is my favorite, though. Coming in as my number 5 happy place game, Fields of Arle. Fields of Arle is a resource conversion worker placement game. I guess that description makes it sound like about 1,000 other Euro games, but there are some things that are very different about Fields of Arle. Now, it is similar to Agricola, but in Fields of Arle, you are working with abundance instead of just barely scraping by. You can plan excessively far out in this game because the only random element is the opening state, where a few tiles will make certain paths a bit easier. However, after taking in that opening state, you could compute the most efficient way to play Fields of Arle from first move to last, because there is no further randomness and no hidden information, which does make this game a little bit different from your average Euro. This sounds like it could be a recipe for analysis paralysis, but even as someone who leans into excessive analysis, this is never a problem because the system isn't tight. So instead, I feel free to decide, this time I want to focus on pottery. Or this time I want to raise livestock. Or I want to make a lot of clothing and things to sell and then travel, selling my wares across the countryside. There are many viable options, and it's a lot of fun to see what other benefits arise from certain paths that you didn't foresee. Like, you decide to raise sheep. Now what are you going to do with all this wool? It's a chill time, and one of the most obviously cozy games that I own, as it's practically an unlicensed Harvest Moon. From now on, my happy place cozy games might not seem that cozy to you. My number 4 happy place game is one in a genre that is normally considered hardcore. It's in a genre of game that if you complain about the difficulty, you'll be chastised by a bunch of old men about participation trophies, and you're told to get good. This genre is dungeon crawlers. And I like quite a few dungeon crawlers, many of them quite crunchy and heavy and difficult and chaotic. But this is my happy place list. And so here I'm putting a game that you basically can't lose. Dungeon Alliance. This is the first occurrence that you'll see in a number of these games where in its primary mode, a competitive mode, the challenge isn't to survive, but to finish in a faster or higher scoring manner than your competitor. Well, I'm playing it solo, and I don't have a competitor, so I'm just trying to do my best and expecting a participation trophy for it. In Dungeon Alliance, you put together a team of 4 heroes from a group of 17 or 21 if you own the expansion, which I do because I really enjoy this game. Your characters are very powerful and grow more so as you build decks for each one of them. They're really made to stomp the monsters into fine paste in the dungeon, because normally you're racing to see who will stomp the enemies the fastest. And if a character dies, they literally just run back in from the entrance the next turn, meaning that your penalty is in speed, because now you're having to move the character square by square across the entire dungeon, rather than a penalty in losing, which is basically impossible. You can play it to a number of rounds and then see how many points you've scored, making it a kind of beat your own score. There are bosses, and I own the champion expansion, which puts you in a special chamber to face the bosses, where they have extra difficult assistance in attacking you. But really, I just like the experience of building out the 4 decks and trying to get these very different characters to synthesize. It's a lot of fun. It honestly is very thinky, but you don't have to min-max. You can put together any wild combination you want, because there's just not a lot of punishment for being suboptimal unless you want there to be. My third happy place game is similar. My third happy place game is similar. My third happy place game is similarly 4th or 5th time's the charm, supposed to get its stress from competition and racing. Without that, the ending is really tough, but the rest of it is actually a cakewalk. But you know what? Sometimes a power fantasy is okay. And Sanctum is one of my favorites. This game got blasted for advertising itself like Diablo, but then it's not a dungeon crawler. Well, here's the thing. Grid-based dungeon crawlers are never going to feel like Diablo, because their video game equivalent is a CRPG. Step by agonizing step, crunching numbers. That will never feel like an ARPG. In Sanctum, you mow through mobs, gaining loot, building up into an unstoppable juggernaut. Instead of increasing stats, your gear gives you all sorts of dice manipulation abilities. And I love some dice manipulation. Every baddie you kill literally has a piece of gear printed on the other side, giving you that sweet loot min-max decision-making bonanza throughout. You can stop and rest up whenever you want to. The only negative to this, unlike in the competitive game where you have people on your tail the whole time, is that a few more cards get added into the final baddie deck. Well, that's a problem for future Jeff, not current Jeff. No, I do try to play as optimally as possible. That's part of the fun. And I do try to squeeze the most distance out of each day. But still, it's not stressful. The boss battle, and this is a complaint that people make, the boss battle feels like its own separate game. But I kind of like that, because if I lose it, I'm just kind of like, it doesn't ruin the experience that came before it. You have 4 different heroes to explore who all play differently, including an archer who has an ability that really breaks solo play by making it so that you almost never have to rest, so that when you face the final boss of the dungeon, he's in his weakest form. And that really turns the game into just a total power fantasy. Guess which character is my favorite for some cozy happy place gaming? All right, so like I said, the top 2 games on my list are still, I believe, my most played games. This number 2 game can be so many different kinds of experiences. You can definitely make it a torturous hell, but you can also get to level 5 and then chill and pile on advanced skills while your characters don't increase in difficulty, because that's based on level. And that game is Thor Against Darkness. This is the dungeon crawler that I feel plays the most like Diablo. One big reason is that the movement is room-based instead of grid, 5 feet at a time. And the second is that you swat vermin en masse. Here's the barks. Meet Rowdy. When I play Thor Against Darkness, I play with the adventure deck cards. They have every single part of the turn flow on each card. Flip, take your room. Flip, what's in the room? Treasure, monster, flip, what specific instance of treasure or monster do you find? That plus the drawing of the dungeon puts me into this like flow state that's hypnotic. Like I said, there are lots of very challenging supplements you can play where sudden death lurks around every corner. Most by Eric Bouchard. My favorite module of his is 4 Against the Netherworld. It's really kind of a dark and delicious masterpiece that has both the dungeon crawling and a satisfying overland hex crawl through a really crazy world between dungeons and temples and towns, which otherwise has not yet been added to the game. But my usual playstyle is super chill. It is Twisted Dungeons, which gives you a different twist to each dungeon you make, plus Twisted Final Fights, which gives you, I think, 48 final bosses that make for a memorable ending to the dungeon. It has been too long since I played this game. It's slipping in my plays just because it's been quite a while. I intend to remedy that soon. I just need to print out my copy of Treacheries of the Troublesome Towns, which I think is just going to add a huge amount to the game. Okay, so my final, most coziest happy place game is one tied to one of my longest running interests/hobbies, and so it's just absolutely slathered in nostalgia for me. I bought my first comic books at a flea market at about age 10, and from that moment, I became obsessed. I still read comic books daily, or rather nightly, because I fall asleep reading comics pretty much every single night. They are definitely a very happy, comforting place for me, and the cutest implementation by far is clearly Marvel United. Some people have described Marvel United as a dumb baby game for babies. Well, sometimes, no matter how big of a grown-up you are, you just have to nurture that dumb little baby inside of you. Marvel United does have some brutally hard villains. I hated Vulture by the time I beat him, and I never legitimately beat Morlun from the Spider-Geddon box set. But especially in Season 1, there are some villains that really allow you to forget the meta, the game, and instead of figuring out like the perfect balance of damage, heroics, and mobility possessed by the characters and deciding your team that way, you play the team that you want to play according to your favorite comic book stories and execute your game plan. That's the key to Marvel United being a cozy game. It turns into a little sandbox sweet treat of a time when you actually get to play to your character's strengths instead of putting out fires, which is also a fun way to play. And yeah, I'm often in the mood for an Eon's End nemesis to toss out another card that's going to blow up the last human sanctuary if I don't discard my entire hand, which I had big plans for. But, you know, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I want to pretend to be a superhero and go out there and do superhero things and lay smack down on a villain. Maybe it's not optimal to team up as the Peter David's X Factor, but I love that team. So I'm going to choose a cakewalk villain and enjoy myself. So those are my happy place games. There are a lot of board games about cats and quilting and much more obviously cozy things, but these are my little safe havens when I just need to be good at something. Let me know about your happy place games in the comments. What do you play when you're wrapped up in a cozy blanket, sipping cocoa by the fireplace? Have a great rest of your day and keep playing solo.